I hope you noticed the way Ann caveated that in terms of Windows Server 2003 support ending in your call processing system. We had some questions about why we would be talking about the end of a Microsoft product, but it definitely affects a lot of you, and those of you who it affects, I'm sure know that, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about. When we talk about the call processing world, we have people all the time ask us, who are you? Even though we've been around forever, we're not really the world's most, the best known name in an average household. And that's because we make backroom products that are really invisible. Even the users who use our products would probably not be able to tell you the name of our product. But we have been at it for a long time. We have a lot of systems deployed. We have a lot of experience in this industry. And you could actually go out to the various industry pundits like Gartner and have them, read off from their report that we're the best in these various areas, etc. So we have a lot of experience. We've been through many operating system changes with our product. When our product was first developed back in 1982, we actually used a version of concurrent DOS, and we've changed our operating system 4 or 5 times. It's something you have to really work at and keep on top of, because as the world changes and networks change, that operating system is kind of the unsung hero in the network. It's what's down there running everything and protecting everything. So when we have a change like we have coming up now with Windows Server 2003, it affects lots of things within the industry. And almost every company out there has some sort of program in place to be searching out those applications and making sure there's a strategy for them. If you look at kind of our approach to this, we build unified communication solutions. That's really all we do. We have 3 areas of focus, and those of you that have been to some of our other webinars have probably kind of seen us talk about how we do this, because communications needs within an enterprise vary. They vary by the individual, the corporation, and teams. But there's a whole other level that we don't always talk about, which is the support. The IT infrastructure piece is another one of our focuses. Every single software release we do has upgrades to the infrastructure pieces, which we connect or that we run on. So this is a key part of our R&D as well. So if you look at why people buy our products, a lot of them start out with replacing a legacy application. Some of you probably are at this webinar because of that. Certainly some of your legacy systems that are going out of support are going to push you in that direction. And so we spend, like I say, a lot of time on the infrastructure and the replacement piece. But at the same time, we understand that the systems you put in today, you want them to last as long as the systems you're taking out, or longer even if possible. So we spend lots of time looking at that ability to move forward. And that's a very broad category now, because it isn't just on the network anymore, and it isn't just a single application silo. It's all of the connectivity piece. So we stay on top of the current UC trend. And you can see us and our speakers at the various conventions talking about all these areas. We're definitely an industry leader in all of these. And once again, all of this runs on top of an infrastructure. And we know enterprise infrastructures. You can take a look at this kind of brief list of some of our customers, and you can see from looking at who they are and what they are that we're going to be very, very familiar with large infrastructures, consolidated, distributed, highly secure, all of those areas that affect, your products. Not just the functionality of your products, because, that's an important piece. That's why you have those solutions, but how they fit into your infrastructure. And we are one of the most flexible in terms of supporting infrastructures. And part of doing that, as I said, is staying current on that underlying level, the infrastructure itself, the operating system. So if you look at what's going on here, this is not news to anyone. This is not a shock. Microsoft did not do that this quickly, but 2003 server as of July, end of support. Now, what does that mean? That doesn't mean it stops working on that day or it becomes unlicensed on that day, but it stops being patched for security issues, and you can't get support on it any longer. And the security piece is a problem. Many of you who work with infrastructure pieces know it's a rare month that goes by where there aren't several, significant patches that go on operating systems that have to do with security. There's a whole world of black hats out there trying to crack into everything, and Microsoft and the rest of these companies have a whole world of white hats, working to counter every one of those steps. So suddenly to have something on your network that has vulnerabilities is just pretty much not acceptable. Now, it isn't that you just worry about the application running on the Windows Server 2003 platform. It's that having that platform in your network, obviously, is an open door, and you're just asking for trouble. So most of you know you have deadlines, and some of you thought about this years ago. Some of you are scrambling at the last minute. If you look at kind of the legacy systems out there, there's an awfully big turnover right now in legacy call processing systems. This is just an excerpt from one of Avaya's notices, and they're turning over product on a pretty regular basis, and the OR messaging doesn't have anything to do with Windows at all. That's a pure Linux-based system. But the call pilot, if you notice, that's probably one of the ones generating some of the biggest scramble right now, where that one is everything except the very latest version is running on Windows 2003. So you now may be faced with a deadline to either upgrade, and upgrading to a call pilot new version maybe is not such a good idea, considering where that product's going, and upgrading to OR messaging might not be attractive to you either. So that's one of the areas that we think we could probably help you with. And then even some of the old modular messaging systems in there are already out of sale and going out of support shortly. The old core systems, while they're not Windows, are still out there, and we still have the problems that are kind of in play today. And as of the end of this year, the system calendars on most of these old systems are going to reset, and basically that's the drop-dead date. So for those of you faithful Octel customers that have had your Octel for 15 years and are holding on to the very last minute, that's where we are. We're in the very last minute. So there's a lot of activity out there where replacing of solutions is being driven by obsolescence. Now, at the same time, there's a lot of really good things you can get from upgrading the system. It isn't just that you're going to replace it because you have to. The system you're going to buy today to replace this legacy system needs to go forward with you. So you need to be not just looking at a one-for-one replacement, but positioning yourself so as you go forward, you're not boxing yourself into any corner. And there's a bunch of ways to do that, and one of them, of course, is to look at your plans over the next 5 to 10 years from an infrastructure point of view. Many of you are also looking at a need to upgrade your telephony infrastructure, and that might go in any number of ways. It might be upgrades, software and hardware upgrades to your existing system. It might be looking at moving from an older TDM system to a newer IP-based system. It might be involved in moving to a different brand of system. It might even be going to a cloud-based system. And make sure that the choices you make today as you replace these legacy systems that you're replacing because you have to, doesn't lock yourself into a corner where you have limited options going forward, or you end up buying that system brand new again in a year or two as part of the larger migration. So we like to talk about investment protection. We hook to every phone system out there today, new and old, and going forward, it's a fairly easy thing to put our platform in your infrastructure connected to one of your older TDM systems, and then as you decide on moving and on changing your architecture, the ability to consolidate and support remote sites and things like that is very easy on our product. So it's a good thing to kind of choose. One of the things that's kind of not very popular about having to move to a new system is you have to do all this work, you have to spend this money, and then you have to disrupt your user base by making them go to a new system. So we work really hard to make that disruption minimal, and the way we do that, and we've been, like I say, been doing this since 1982, is we try and make the pieces that face your users look as familiar as possible. And one of the ways we do that is we have alternate telephone user interface. And these alternate TUIs basically can be used to emulate most of the popular legacy systems today. So the Octel Aria, the old 250 series, the Serenade, which is the old BMX product, Intuitiotics, Nortel Meridian Mail, Call Pilot, very similar interfaces, and ours has the extra functionality to make it emulate both. Mitel, the Centigram or the NewPoint interface. Adomo, which is actually the Aura messaging interface. Adomo is the product that Avaya purchased for that front-end piece of that product. So if you're looking at getting off of an Aura messaging, you can keep that interface. And then the older Active Voice Kinesis and Repartee interface. So minimum disruption is one of the things you want to look at. It's one thing when you buy a new solution to deploy new functionality, and you build into that plan the work it takes to get a new solution into your enterprise. But people don't want to spend a lot of time replacing an existing solution and having to spend the time and money to get that settled in. So look very carefully at how you can go into these new solutions with minimum impact on your people and your infrastructure. We have support for Windows 2008 and 2012. And we do Exchange 2013, we do Office 365, pretty much anything in your infrastructure, you're going to be comfortable that we can sit in and play in that world. Not just voicemail, but call processing is another thing as you look at replacing these older systems. A lot of people forget how much business process is threaded through their older systems. Something as simple as a multi-level menu or a voice survey, or there's various things that are in there, and you would just assume all this old functionality will be available in any new system you look at, and unfortunately that's not true. Many of the new systems you look at today, the old systems by that manufacturer were obsoleted. This is a new system. It focused primarily on the newer architecture and functionality, and they're all pretty short on features in that old area. One of the great things about us is when we started, our timing was just perfect in the market because we started right at the time when you could use an open operating system and industry standard hardware. So we never had a proprietary product, which means every old feature we put in the product 20 years ago is still in the product. So a migration from a legacy system to our product is pretty much flawless in terms of duplicating whatever functionality you happen to have in that older product. I know call processing, automated attendant is not a reason people go out to buy new systems, but it's good to know that when you do make a move, you won't be losing, you won't be moving backwards, or suddenly on Monday when the new system's in place, discovering you have to scramble because there's things this system doesn't do that you assumed it would. This is also a time, since you're replacing a component, and maybe multiple components at multiple sites, where a lot of customers tend to look at the centralization process. We've watched centralization over the years. For us, our exposure to it really started in the kind of the data world, the infrastructure of having multiple buildings and locations with multiple groupware products and networks. People figured out pretty quickly if you could centralize that, you could make it much easier. Not only did you deliver more functionality to your users, but much easier to maintain and lowered the ongoing total cost of ownership, which was a very important piece. And as soon as IT departments were successful with that, the entire enterprise started looking at doing that as well. So now here's one more of your chances to say, I have 5 locations. In 3 of them, I have systems I have to update in the next 6 months because they're going out of service, out of support. Wouldn't it be nice to take this time to start consolidating them? Now, you might not be ready to consolidate your telephony infrastructure. That's a much bigger step. But you still could get started by putting our system in place to be the consolidation piece for all of your unified communications. We have the great feature set for doing that. We have an architecture where we can deploy our services on anything as small as a single 1U rack server, all the way up to a fully geo-redundant system with full redundancy, automatic failover, everything you need in a larger network consolidation. And of course, you can virtualize our system as you do all of this as well. We support any of the fold systems out there, so even though you're not ready to tie everything together on a single IP phone system today, you can still start with our solutions and be getting a jump on that consolidation process. One of the pieces that you want to be looking at, and this is one that we find is overlooked by a lot of customers. Customers facing a deadline, they say, I have to get off my call pilot because of the operating system, so let's just go out to bid and find another voicemail that does just what the call pilot does. And I understand that kind of approach because you need to get it done, but keep in mind what you're doing is you're picking your call processing and unified communications platform, not just for this replacement, but going forward. So one of the big things happening in our industry today is all this focus on mobility. Mobility is increasing productivity. It's doing a lot of great things, but it really throws a wrench in the works for the infrastructure people. Between security, deployment, and support, mobility is something that people are spending a lot of time and money on. So as you pick this base communications platform, you should be looking at the mobility side of it. And mobility includes all sorts of pieces. Certainly, the unified messaging piece, which has been out there for quite a while, and the flexibility you need for that. This is another area where consolidation, going to the cloud, older systems having to be upgraded, there's a lot of activity in these areas, and you should be comfortable that the platform you pick is really going to work across the board for you. Some people say, well, I have Exchange, so I'll just look at what works with Exchange, and yet within their own company they might have a movement to move to Office 365 in the next 2 years. And in that kind of environment, if you make a wrong choice, you'll end up replacing your communications platform again. So make sure that the breadth, the scope of whatever products you're looking at match wherever you might be going in the next few years. We talk about unified messaging. We started unified messaging in our industry years ago. We had the first system out about 2 years ahead of anyone else. And didn't do us a lot of good. Not a lot of people bought it because they didn't really understand it. But what it did for us was it got us into the industry early. And now we've spent years with customers having them educate us on what the challenges are and how they want to face deploying this kind of architecture. Today, while we do talk about features and environment, what kind of email system do you have? What's your architecture? Are you moving to the cloud? There's a lot of those discussions. But interestingly enough, the biggest discussion for unified messaging is not about functionality, but it's about kind of architecture and responsibility. People talk about the 5 C's. This is compliance, confidentiality, the configuration of your network, capacity, and cost. And compliance and confidentiality at the top are the driving factors. While there are all sorts of laws that carefully describe e-document requirements for corporations or different industries in terms of the need to archive and make available for disclosure for legal reasons, the voicemail stored in email piece is still a little bit vague. And as a result, people they aren't comfortable making a decision that locks them in. The great thing about our product is we understand those challenges, once again, because we've been in the industry for so long, and we're more than happy to have a conversation where we talk about how we can store messages on a user-by-user basis wherever the customer feels, the requirement points. In other words, for some users, we can certainly store their messages in email. Those users that are highly mobile and want that flexibility, while for others, perhaps in healthcare, the ones that might have confidential patient information in their mailboxes, we can deploy a secure-based version of unified messaging where the users still get all the flexibility of a graphical client, but they can't get those messages out of the system. They can do everything at the computer that they can do over the phone, but they can't do things like forward them to their own email address. So when you talk about the unified messaging piece, that discussion about architecture is going to be a very important one. When we look at mobility, we basically spend a lot of time looking at what is used inside the office, what functionality is being deployed for users, and then how we can extend that kind of universal way of doing business out to mobile users. And we have a software package called ATOM, AVST Total Office Manager, that takes all the things you need for mobile employees. Unified messaging, a speech rec user interface, a personal assistant, which is a find me, follow me type of solution. We make this context aware, meaning we can make our application work based on other pieces of information in your organization, such as the user's calendar, their contacts, their presence information from Link. And then we add to that the ability to actually know where they are, in the sense that we can have locations defined so we know when they're working from home, we know that, and we know how to route calls to them. So we can increase the call completion and shorten the human latency by using the context information. And this is good for 2 reasons. 1, it gives the callers much better information about what's going on, and 2, the users, they don't have to maintain this app. It's automatic because it's triggering off of other things in the enterprise. So ATOM is great in terms of reading your calendar, and basically it's going to go ahead and do things like create a greeting on the fly that says Neil Butler is in a meeting and we'll be back at 11 a.m. And in the case of if you're sitting in a meeting with your mobile device, which most of us are these days, it'll actually give you the ability to have a pop-up to tell you have an incoming call and to allow you to silently screen that call, to take that call, to play back a pre-recorded message to the caller saying Neil Butler was unable to take your call but will return the call in 1 hour. So a lot of new functionality for those of us that are kind of tied to the meeting environment. In the link area, we can also read your presence from link and build custom greetings and custom call routing rules. So when you go into Do Not Disturb with link, we know not to send phone calls to your desk because that's how you would have set the system up. So all of that kind of context makes for a very easy experience for the users, and you get something unique here, which people worry about a lot when they buy UC. You get a system that you don't have to worry about whether you'll get the value out of it, whether your users will actually use it, because once it's programmed, it happens automatically. One of the examples would be our location-based service. If you have our mobile client, a user can go and build a location. Now, the user here has actually gone in and said, build me a location. I'm in the office right now. Look at my phone and recognize this location of my phone as what I will call office. So it goes out and it does triangulation with the cell towers, geolocation, and builds an address. If it's an Android device, it connects to your Wi-Fi. And I now have this piece of information available to the system. I don't know where the user is at all times. This isn't a tracking device. But if I have a rule that says, oh, I'm supposed to ring the user at his desk now, if I have this built, I can say, oh, well, let me see if he's at his desk. And our system will actually ping that mobile device and say, are you in the office? And if the answer is no, then we'll move on to the next call rule. Why would we ring the phone if we know they're not there? We can build a location for home. And now we actually have 3 locations, office, home, and elsewhere. And I now can have rules that know which device list to use based on where I am. Makes for a much higher call completion. And once again, it's nothing that the user has to do. I don't have to change my greeting every time my condition changes. I don't have to tell the system where I am. It's all automatic. We have mobile clients both for iOS and Android devices. They do all the things you'd expect them to do. They let you get to your messages. They receive incoming calls. They make outgoing calls. There's a couple of things that are kind of unique. The visual call screening piece that I referred to in a meeting is probably the most popular feature for people who are in meetings. All of us have sat in meetings for years and watched our email. We all know there's an email message that might come in that'd be more important than what we're doing in that meeting, and we will step out to handle that. But we can't do that with phone calls because we really can't answer the call for 2 reasons. One, it interrupts the meeting. And secondly, it's very hard to say, oh, it's you. Yes, you're not important enough for me to handle the call right now. Call me back later. But if we take this application we have for call screening and enable it, when a call comes in either from another user on your system or from anyone in your contacts, we will recognize that call. We will give you a silent pop-up on your mobile device saying, you have an incoming call from John Smith. What do you want to do? If you want to take the call, you hit the button, step out in the hall, and then your phone will ring and you can take the call. If you hit reject, it goes to voicemail. The other options you have are things like recording a personal acknowledgement. I can pick up the phone and hit the record button and say, John, listen, I'm just finishing up a meeting here. It'll be about 20 minutes. I'll call you when I get out. Or you can do that silently by hitting the silent acknowledge. So much more productivity for those people that are in meetings. One of the great things about Atom is it's speech enabled. Probably the best thing you can do for mobile employees is give them a speech user interface. Now, you've probably looked at speech user interfaces on other products. This is not, you just don't compare to what we have. And the reason is, this is a 15-year-old interface. This is not version 1 or version 2. We've been working diligently on a speech rec interface for 15 years. And as a result, ours is the most full-featured and the most intuitive to use. And when I say full-featured, as an example, when I get in my car in the morning, I hit a button, my speakerphone calls into work, and I hear, hello, Neil Butler, what would you like to do? And I say, what are my appointments for today? And it reads me my calendar, so I know kind of what's coming up. Then I say, get new messages. And it'll get my new emails and read them to me, and get my new voicemails and play them to me. Maybe right in the middle of one email message, it's from a coworker saying, is it okay if I reschedule that meeting out an hour? And I can either say call back, in which case it'll call that user, or I can say reply, and it'll say record your reply. And I say, yeah, listen, John, that's fine. I'm free for that hour. Go ahead and set it up. Or I can actually go into my calendar and change the meeting myself. So all of that from that speech user interface. That's the kind of functionality you're looking for in a product, even if you aren't expecting to put it in today. For the during the lifetime of the product you're evaluating to do this voicemail replacement, this is the kind of technology you're going to want to be looking at. So it's just good to make sure that whatever product you look at gives you that. We also have the ability, as long as we've been in the industry, which is over 30 years, we still have a customer almost every single month who comes to us and says, yeah, we like all that stuff, but I have a very specific need. I need to do this thing. And to handle that kind of functionality, we have toolkits on our product. So we can build custom parts of a solution. And they really vary widely. Sometimes somebody comes across and asks us for one that we like so much, we turn it into an application you can buy on the product. And one of those was a product we sell as Notify Express, which is an outbound call campaign. And we built this years ago, and it's turned out to be very popular. So this is now a module you can buy ready-made on our system. And the thought here is, for those areas where you're going to be making regular outbound calls to deliver information to callers, we usually talk about a medical clinic, because that's the one most of us have had experience with, where every afternoon at about 2, they start to call all the next day's appointments and say, hi, this just to remind you have an appointment with Dr. Smith tomorrow. And are you going to be there, or do we need to reschedule? You can automate all that functionality. And the reason we talk about this under the custom section is this is built using our toolkits. One of our toolkits you could easily call an IVR system. Not just menus, but a true answer the call, prompt for data input, access a database, SharePoint or Oracle or SAP, extract some information, read it back to the caller, etc. Information access. All of this is possible with our custom toolkit. As we kind of start looking at what goes on in that organization, one of the first slides we talk about the differences between personal needs, enterprise needs, and team needs. The team is a very interesting piece these days. Teams used to be easy to support. There were a bunch of people at one location, but now teams have gotten much more complex. So in an environment where you're distributing calls, simple hunt groups, you know where they can be used. Those are great. They do what they do, and they're highly reliable. When you start having a very high-end application, you'll go with a call center, 100 people in a room, what we would call process workers, all doing the same basic function. But in the middle, there's something where you have these informal work groups. We usually talk about an IT help desk, because in an IT help desk, you've got 10 or 15 people, and they have slightly differing skill sets, but they're all sort of answering that general call pool. And while you could use a hunt group, it doesn't do a very good job, and you don't really want to pay $1,500 an agent every year for these people, because they don't take call after call after call. They answer a call, do some work on that call, and come back. For that, we have TeamQ. And TeamQ is an informal, skills-based routing pull model call center. It's for small teams of 25 agents or less, and the concept here is we will take that call and answer it with a script, and then put those entries on a client that the agents can see, and they can take that call that's the right one for their skill set. This is, like all of our functionality, something that runs on our system. This is not a separate server, doesn't require any kind of CTI interface. It's just a very easy way to support informal call groups. Basically, there's a screenshot. You can see that would be what the agents would look at, and they can go down and, based on their skill sets, pick that piece that they would want to handle. And they can do other things. You notice Tom G there is on a call, plus has a call on hold. Being a help desk, he probably talked to Bill, and Bill, he told Bill, yeah, reset your system. If that doesn't fix it, call me back. Then he got on the next call, and within a minute or so, Bill was calling back in. It only makes sense for Tom to take that call, so he clicked Bill and reserved it by hitting the hold button. So that kind of manipulation of a queue for knowledge workers is very unique in this industry, and it's something that's very inexpensive to add to our platform. So as you start looking at what you're going to do, you're probably looking largely at the voice area. I have something dying because it's going out of support, therefore I'm going to replace it. And we understand that's where it all starts. But keep in mind, the next things you're going to be looking for as that system within your enterprise ages is to add other functionality to it, and you don't want to have to replace again. So be looking at these other areas as you decide what you're going to do. Because of our architecture and the way we started our product, we're kind of unique in the fact that we aren't one of those bolt-on companies where you buy the voicemail server and then you buy the speech server and then you buy the mobile app server. And while on a PowerPoint presentation you have all these wonderful checkboxes, the systems, they don't know about each other. We are one application. And that means when I am in my car on the way to work in the morning listening to my email and someone calls me, the system isn't going to try and send that call blindly to my desk. Even though it knows my location, it's not going to send it blindly to my phone. It knows I'm logged in. So it's actually going to do a little tone in my ear and let me take that call if I want it or not. You cannot get that kind of functionality from bolt-on solutions. So look at the platform architecture. It's probably the most important piece as you're going forward. A lot of these silo-based solutions that the traditional companies, the traditional interconnect vendors still sell, while they give you a great, really nice checklist, those are the ones that after a year you look at and realize you're not getting the value from, because the way the architecture put it together, it's just too hard for the users to put that into their day-to-day. You know your users. They're not going to do much in terms of taking advantage of these if it requires them to do anything. So be looking for that context-driven kind of solution. So as you look at whatever systems you're looking at to replace those legacy systems, that operating system problem, make sure you're looking at a wider scope than just replacing the voice functionality. And that brings us here.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Okay, so we do have a handful of questions already in the queue. Before we get started, just as a reminder, if you have that minimized and you're looking for the question box, use the orange button in the upper corner, and then the window will expand and you'll see the spot to type your question. So first one, Neil, can you select the telephone user interface on a per-user basis?
Yes, the user can't. And the reason we do that is because when you maintain multiple user interfaces, you want control over that. But once you add that module to the system, any user can be set up. And this is extremely important when you go to collapse systems. I have 5 sites. I have 3 different voicemails at those sites. You don't have to pick one interface and make some people learn the new interface. You can give those people who are coming off a call pilot the call pilot interface. One's coming off an ARIA, the ARIA interface. Makes it much less disruptive in a consolidation area.
Okay, next question. Can we migrate user data from call pilot to AVST?
Yeah, there's a certain amount of user data you can migrate. It's easy to do the mailboxes. You can run reports, export those to a text file, and then we have an import utility that will actually bring that in and create everything. It won't import the security code, which you can understand you wouldn't want to do. You don't want that in plain text anywhere. But we do have a tutorial we turn on, and then when the new user logs in the first time, they have to go in and change their password, record their name and greeting, etc. To go beyond that, to look at importing messages and recorded audio, while it can be done, it requires third-party products to extract that audio. And we've done that. We're happy to talk to you about it. But it's a more expensive process. The simply export and import to get the data in, that's fairly straightforward.
Okay, there's a question about upgrading. This is a current customer who's on version 8. Let's see, he says, what version of AVST software do we upgrade to? They're still running on Windows 2003.
Sure. Well, I assume they're on ExpressCare, and that means they can get the latest and greatest 8.6, which is out. So what you would probably do is upgrade your operating system at the same time and go to 8.6. And that would support Windows 2012, and you'd be set for another 5 or 10 years.
Okay. So there's actually a follow-on question, the one about the call pilot moving over to AVST. He wants to know, he says he meant the recordings, migrating those over.
Sure. So we'll have a conversation with them offline. There are third-party people we use that extract those, and in the case of Call Pilot, because it's a proprietary wave format, there's some manipulation that has to be done. But once you deal with one of those companies, and they literally deliver usually a server with everything on a drive, we have a tool that imports it, and it's very easy for us to do. Getting that data out, though, has an additional expense, and we can have an offline conversation and talk about that.
Okay, great. Next, does AVST require client software to be installed on the user computers or laptops for unified messaging?
We don't require it. You certainly, if you, let's say you're storing your messages in Exchange, you could open up your Outlook inbox and look at our messages, and you would see an email file with a wave attachment. When you double-click it, it'll launch your audio player, and all that's just standard stuff. What we do provide for that environment is a personal form for Outlook, which adds kind of user functionality like a recorder bar, so you can control the playback of the message, and a couple of other items like that. Not required, but that makes it helpful. The other way of doing unified messaging when you're doing it with us through the secure methodology is you just open up your web client, and there's no plugins or add-ins for that at all. It's all completely web-driven.
Okay, thanks, Neil. And actually, we do have a recorded webinar which covers a little bit more about our unified messaging options, and so I can certainly send that out to either the entire group in the follow-up email or just the person who asked that question.
Excellent.
Okay, another one, Neil, and this one, I don't know, we may want to take this one offline too, but I'm going to ask it anyway just for fun. Regarding Windows 2003, have people considered firewalling the call pilot or other system built on 2003 off the network?
Sure. And depending on how you're working, you have to keep in mind there's some probably some version of network connectivity required just to connect to the phone system. And yes, I've had people say, I don't understand why I can't just take it off the network and run. Well, from our point of view, we're fine. We'll continue. If you have a supported version of Call Express, we'll continue to support. The fact that you are on Windows 2003, we're not going to say, no, we won't support you. But it's, most IT departments I talk to are not willing to do that. Yes, it's not on your network, but, what happens is you need a service call, you need some kind of support, we have to remote into the machine, you throw a modem on it, those kind of things are possible, and I think it makes most data people just very nervous. It's not a requirement for us if they want to do that. Well, thank you. I'd just like to let everyone know we appreciate when you come to these. It's hard to take time out of your business day to do that. If you're not getting what you want, you should let us know. If they need to be more in-depth or quicker, or there's subjects we haven't covered, if you would let us know, and you can do that by going to info@avst.com. Believe me, it's very important that we deliver content that you want to have. So let us know how we're doing, and maybe there's something else you'd like to have us talk about. So thank you very much.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.